back to the stars of comedy. We're in conversation with Abhay, Samson and Richard. Thank you for continuing to be with us.
Thanks
second week in a row.
Thanks for getting us back.
So, as we were discussing, you're all full-time professional comedians.
Yep.
Does one still need a fallback option? At what stage can you say that, oh, I'm here to stay?
It depends on momentum. If you've gained some momentum in your career, it's probably better to make it full-time and go full-time, go the distance. But if you're struggling, then you should probably evaluate your options, right? The other thing is fallback options are not really a good idea, in my opinion, because then you're not fully committed to it.
Yep.
And you should always try different things, because sometimes, humor can transcend just being on stage. You can have like humor in a written format. You can have you can write a movie. You can write a screenplay. You can write a sketch. Get on YouTube. And stand-up is just one avenue, right? So comedy can go beyond different avenues. So it can go. You can try different things with comedy. So as a profession, it depends on where you're doing it. Like in India, like we said before, it's on an upswing. So it's good to do it full-time. But in America, it's saturated. So sometimes it just depends on how well you're doing in your career, because you need to really think about it long term, right? Over 20-30 years, what is it that I want to do? And that really is a defining career.
Yep.
So
I just want to mention, it depends on the type of person you are also, because there's two things. If you're going to completely quit your job and do comedy full time, then that's good, because you have a fire lit under you that's saying, hey, you got to do this. But on the other hand, you're trying to be funny without any money.
Yeah.
And so, there's nothing worse than being like, oh, dating is weird, and you have $0 in your bank account. That to me doesn't seem very enjoyable.
Yeah.
If you're the kind of person that can weather that, that's okay.
Yeah.
And but I also think that there's merit to having a day job so that you can be comfortable and you can be yourself on stage.
Yeah. Without something actually bogging you down, pulling you down.
Yeah,
To,
or at least have like a cushion of cash so that you don't have to, at least make sure that your finances are in place before you go in full time.
Yep.
That's really important, because it's like with any creative profession, there are sometimes there can be uncertainties, and you don't really plan for that, but it can happen. So you need to be prepped for that, I guess. Yeah.
I think that's a very different perspective. For someone like me who grew up in a chawl system, we may not have enough finances to create a backup, and so we have to just jump into it. Whereas somebody who comes with a good professional background, it's always harder to quit, which is what happened with me as well.
Yeah.
So I had a high-tech salary coming in, and then I talked to full-time comedians, and I remember one particular time there was a Native American comedian I was doing a show with.
Okay.
He's been doing this for like 30 years. He's been on TV. He's tours nationally and stuff like that. And we were just talking, and he said, okay, so let me get this straight. You have a wife, you bought a house in San Francisco City, and you want to give all that up to do full-time comedy. You are living the life that I wish I would live after I've done comedy for my entire life. Like, that's what I want to retire in. You're giving that up to do what? And that hit me very close, right? And so that backed me off a lot. Because do I want to go out and sleep on couches and drive 6 hours to do some crappy gigs in the middle of nowhere?
Yep.
Versus trying to, like you said, be yourself and not have to compromise on your material.
Yeah.
So it's very different and subjective for everybody. Yeah. There's no universal advice.
Yeah.
If this is where you see yourself making a career, go for it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You never know until you try.
Yeah.
But how much time till you succeed? Like, there
That's
could be that
also
instant hit.
Correct.
Or you could actually take a while till you get that plateau to where, you can say,
I think the best analogies we come up with is cricket, right?
His
you have
favorite.
I love cricket,
you have people who shine right out of the gate.
Yeah.
Like not everybody is a Sachin Tendulkar.
Yeah.
They come once in a generation.
Yeah.
So you will have those amazing comedians who will just come up and just rise through and become the big thing.
Yeah.
And then you have all the others who are trying to make a mark. They'll be in and out. They'll do something. They'll lose something. And again, it's not a math. It is an art.
Yeah.
So you can't say just because you've done comedy for 7 years, you now deserve to be somewhere.
Yeah.
You just may not be good enough. And somebody who's just doing it for a year may be phenomenal, and then boom, like Dhoni became the captain as early as he did, and then he was the most successful one. Nobody expected him to be as good when he became one. And he started very early.
Like Sachin Tendulkar versus Vinod Kambli, like it's like, even though he had that talent, he had that work ethic and that rigor to keep him steady, like it's so much pressure. I mean, I always think about this, like as a comedian or as anyone in a professional life that's trying to do something, you can you actually emulate that whole mental frame of a Sachin Tendulkar. And it's almost impossible, right? Because you have to have like those hours of training to give you that confidence to handle any situation.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with comedy or acting or whatever profession you want to get into, like creatively.
I just want to point out real quick that like you're talking about like how many years until you're successful. That's the whole thing, is that there's nothing like that. And it's when people come from the corporate world where it's like every year you have a performance review, they start expecting something similar in the arts. And that's the total wrong way to think about it.
Right.
There's not any guaranteed success at all. And so if you're counting, how many years, I mean, it's sort of the wrong
and
mentality.
also the definition of success, right? For me, being able to do 365 shows in a year may define success. For somebody, it's when I have $1 million in my bank, it's success. So it's also a very relative, subjective situation. Sorry, that just went off like in a completely philosophical term. But
what are the influences on your comedy, both national and international?
Nationally, I watched Andaz Apna Apna when I was a kid, and that was the first time I really laughed. Like from one scene to the other, I found it really funny. When I was like 10, 12 years old when that movie came out, and I found it to be one of the funniest movies. And we still go back to it. And then there was like these old Randhir Kapoor movies, BVO BV. That was like really silly, but it was funny at the time. I found that funny. And then as I grew, I found like some of the stuff that like nationally at least. There was some, like Delhi Belly was a fairly funny movie. Some scenes were well written in that movie. It did really well. And then that's the kind of stuff that I laugh at. And then there's internationally, like comedy wise, I never get bored of watching Office Space. That is my favorite movie because it reflects my life very well, and I'm sure it does to most Indian engineers. That's my favorite movie. And then from a comedic standpoint, Richard Pryor was one of my favorite comedians. Like he had a different way of telling a story, and for someone living in India to relate to what he was doing in America, that was like amazing, because I can see what he's doing. Like I can relate to what he's doing, and that was amazing. As a storyteller, that would be the pinnacle for anyone. So
What cracks you up?
The way I got into comedy was basically my dad would show me Laurel and Hardy videos when I was a small kid. And so when he was growing up in Bombay, he would go to cinema and watch Laurel and Hardy. I mean, back in the 60s. And so he brought that to me. So basically, I was the only kid growing up in the 80s watching Laurel and Hardy in the Bay Area. And they're so funny because it's all slapstick. And slapstick is universal. And so I think I've actually carried that into my comedy now, especially even on this tour, trying to find universal jokes.
For me, I think purely from comedy perspective, Johnny Lever was the first stand-up comedian of India. A very different style. He does a lot of impressions and mimicking, but he was so funny. And when he made his foray into Bollywood, again, he had been doing stage shows and he'd been doing it for so long. People probably don't know about how hard he worked to get to where he is. And now he became like the mega star.
And still be actually as clean as he is.
He is, right? And then, like, I remember a phase in like 90s, before I left for US, in 90s, when you had Johnny Lever being publicized. Like, Johnny Lever is in this movie, there's going to be something good in this movie, because Baki 90s movies, half of them were crap. And so he made the movies more watchable. Like, you would actually wait for him to show up on screen. And so I had seen a lot of his stage shows as well. He also used to hang out in the area I grew up in, which is Dongri in Bombay, one of the most hardcore areas of Bombay. And then going to the West and watching stand-up as an art form, which changed my perspective completely. Watched a bunch of guys, Chris Rock and all the big names that we have all seen. But the guy who influenced and changed my comedy was George Carlin. I hear a lot of Indian comics also mention that name. Everybody's inspired by him. To me, he was the pinnacle of what a stand-up should be. Very satirical, political, almost philosophical in his approach. And he took on the establishment. He was never doing the run-of-the-mill stuff. He would take something that is going to antagonize somebody. And that was amazing to watch.
Hold that thought. We're going to take a break.
That's not the best approach for me, at least. I would just like try to get to know the audience and then do jokes from there. But people do that sometimes. They cuss all the time and they intimidate the audience into laughing. It's almost like they're being held hostage to this.